What's up YouTube, it's NBA Backcourt Media and I am back with another video. The NBA trade deadline just recently ended and there were a lot of moves made, so I want to get my thoughts and opinions on each one. For the most part, this is going to be unscripted and unedited, just my raw, first impression thoughts for each trade. But without further ado, leave a like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that fancy stuff that helps on my channel, and let's get straight into it. Just a disclaimer before we officially start, we are going to be talking about every single trade that happened at the deadline, at least from what I can find. That means all the big ones, the small ones, the medium ones. Of course, some are going to get more time than others. Obviously the big trades are going to get more time than the smaller trades, but we're going to be talking about every single trade. So if your favorite team made a trade, we're going to be talking about it. So of course, the most recent trade that happened and the biggest trade that happened is the James Harden-Ben Simmons deal. The Philadelphia 76ers traded Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks to the Brooklyn Nets for James Harden and Paul Millsap. Seeing this from the Sixers perspective, obviously they got a superstar level player in James Harden. Regardless if you think he's declining or if he's not been on his game or not, he's still a superstar level player, at least in my opinion, and he's definitely going to help the championship hopes. A lot of people have catapulted them to the favorites, and although they're definitely in the top of the conference as far as who's has the chances to win the championship, I'm still going to personally bet on the Milwaukee Bucks to go back to the finals. But the Sixers have definitely put themselves in a really good position. Obviously, Ben Simmons was going to go. Andre Drummond, I don't think is that big of a deal. I would have hoped that they didn't have to give up Seth Curry, but looking at the pieces on their roster, it was either Seth Curry or Matisse Thybulle, so they just picked one and went with it, and either one would have been great to keep, either one would have been hard to let go, but Seth Curry is just a really good player that was really valuable to their team, so I didn't want them to give him up, but it's just the way it is when you're getting somebody like James Harden. And then the 2 first-round picks is, 2 first-round picks, I'm sure they're not going to be super valuable. I'm not sure what years they are. I should be able to put them on the screen as you're watching this, but I'm not sure what year they are. But depending on the timeline of those, they could be super valuable, they could not. But either way, this is a really good trade for the 76ers. Looking at this from the Nets perspective, they definitely got a good haul back for James Harden, but at the same time, Andre Drummond is, really good to be a backup center to, get some quality minutes. I'm not a huge fan of him, but in limited minutes, he can do some good things. Seth Curry is obviously a really good shooter, improved as a playmaker and a scorer and an overall scorer, and overall he's just a really good player. And then of course Ben Simmons is, despite all the negative media attention that he's been getting, he's really good. But as far as the direction that they're going with this, trading James Harden away and with Kyrie not being able to, play that many games, basically you're rolling with Kevin Durant and Ben Simmons if he's playing, which I'm assuming he's going to be playing, but you're just going to be rolling with Kevin Durant and Ben Simmons. And I don't think that, especially with Kyrie's limited availability, I don't think that they're really a championship contender anymore. They're still probably going to make the playoffs, but I don't see them as a top tier contender. I just don't know what direction they're going to try and go in with this new weird roster where they're halfway contending, but they got Ben Simmons, so it doesn't really fit with what they're trying to do per se. But it's just a lot of balls in the air. I guess we'll just see how it works out when they get on the court together, but it's just a lot of stuff to consider. And I don't know, they definitely got a good haul back for James Harden, but as far as the direction they're going and what they're going to do going forward with these pieces that they've acquired, that's just still up for debate, so we're just going to have to see what they do. Charlotte Hornets acquired Montrezl Harrell in exchange for Vernon Carey and Ish Smith. Now, I'm not really a huge fan of this trade, especially for the Hornets, because I'm not really a huge fan of Montrezl Harrell, especially in the playoffs. I understand why they did it, considering the fact that Miles Turner was off the market due to the moves that the Pacers recently made, which we will talk about soon. So they tried to get a replacement in Montrezl Harrell, but I'm just not a huge fan of his game for multiple reasons. As far as the Wizards, they got a young center and a backup point guard. I would say that's a pretty solid return for Montrezl Harrell, but it's just not a trade that I'm too interested in and a trade that I'm not, very excited about. Celtics traded Josh Richardson and Romeo Langford to the Spurs for Derek White. Now, looking at the Celtics side of things, I really like this trade for them. Derek White is a really good all-around guard. He's good at scoring. He's a solid playmaker, a solid defender, just solid all around. And Josh Richardson and Romeo Langford were 2 pieces that weren't really working out for him. So to ship them off when they had little to no value, at least to the team, for someone like Derek White is just really good for them. Whether they play him at the 1 or the 2, on the starters or off the bench, either way, he's going to be a great addition. As far as the Spurs, Derek White didn't really fit their timeline. I think he's around 25, 26, maybe even 27. And getting a young guy like Romeo Langford is, pretty solid for them. If anybody's going to do anything with a young player, it's going to be the Spurs. So I hope Romeo Langford can at least turn it around a little bit there. Overall, pretty solid trade for both teams. Mavericks traded Kristaps Porzingis and a second-round pick to the Wizards for Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. Now, on the Mavericks side of things, I really don't get why they made this trade. If they were going to trade Porzingis, they should have traded him for an expiring contract so that they can go big in free agency and try and get a second star next to Luka. Instead, they traded for somebody like Dinwiddie, who has 2 years and I believe a team or player option, making at least 15 plus a year, and another guy in Davis Bertans, who is pretty overpaid and hasn't been playing that well recently ever since he got his contract. So overall for the Mavericks, especially losing, whatever star power they did have in Porzingis, who was actually having a pretty solid season, last time I checked, I don't see the point for this trade from their point of view. It just seems like sabotage the way that it's just not a good trade at all. Looking at the Wizards side of things, they got somebody in Porzingis who could be a second guy who could put up some good numbers next to Beal. I don't really know what direction they're going in right now. They're kind of wishy-washy and trying to win with Beal while also having some young guys like Avdija and, Hachimura and, Kuzma developing and, things of that nature. Even though Kuzma's not that young, but you get the point that I'm trying to make. So their direction is pretty weird, but as far as the trade, like value for value straight up, it was a pretty good trade for them. They got another really good guy in Porzingis to pair next to Beal, and hopefully they can capitalize on that going forward. The Pacers sent Torrey Craig to the Suns for Jalen Smith and a future second-round pick. For the Suns, they get another 3-and-D guy, and for the Pacers, they get a young big man to maybe try and do something with, as well as a second-round pick. Overall, pretty solid trade for both sides, nothing really huge there. The Celtics sent Dennis Schroeder, Enes Freedom, and Bruno Fernando to the Houston Rockets for Daniel Tice. For the Celtics, this was probably in preparation to get Derek White to replace Dennis Schroeder. Enes Freedom and Bruno Fernando weren't really consequential to the team, so moving them was probably just to fill salary. And they're getting back a solid center in Daniel Tice. And for the Rockets, they're probably just moving that money off the books. I believe Dennis Schroeder is on a 1-year deal, and maybe Enes and Bruno are as well. So that's probably just moving Daniel Tice's contract off the books like they've been meaning to do. So a solid trade for both sides. In this massive 4-team deal, the Milwaukee Bucks acquired Serge Ibaka from the Los Angeles Clippers for Rodney Hood and Semi Ojeleye, and the Bucks also traded Donte DiVincenzo to the Sacramento Kings and received 2 second-round picks and cap considerations. And then the Kings sent Marvin Bagley III to the Detroit Pistons for Trey Lyles and Josh Jackson. Now for the Milwaukee Bucks, although I do like Serge Ibaka and I'm higher on him currently than most, I don't see why having him and Brook Lopez on the roster makes sense, especially since they fill the same role and the best lineups for the Bucks are when Giannis is at center or when he's at power forward and they have someone like Bobby Portis who's more versatile defensively at center. And also trading away DiVincenzo, even though I think he's been injured, which is why I haven't seen him play, I don't see why you would trade him because he's been like pretty dang good for y'all when he has played. He suffered a really bad injury, I think like before last year playoffs or maybe in the first round. But I think he can come back and bounce back and still be the same player, if not better than he was. So I don't see why you would trade him if I'm the Bucks. As far as the Clippers, they're acquiring Rodney Hood and Semi Ojeleye, which is not too big of a deal. Trading away Serge Ibaka is not too big of a deal either. He wasn't really getting much playing time for them, so it's pretty, meh for them. As far as the Kings, they're getting Donte DiVincenzo as their Tyrese Halliburton consolation prize to start at the shooting guard. Donte DiVincenzo is good. I really like that addition for them, but at the same time, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth knowing that Tyrese Halliburton was traded away and that's what they got back. Again, we'll talk about that move more soon. And they also sent away Marvin Bagley, which they weren't doing anything with him, so it makes sense to send him away, but they didn't really get much back for him in Trey Lyles and Josh Jackson. They were not really going to do anything for them. For the Pistons, I really like this. Getting Marvin Bagley is going to be really good for you guys. They're going to try to develop that core with Cade Cunningham, Sadiq Bey, Marvin Bagley. I believe that's going to be like the main 3 that they're going to try and develop around. And I still think Marvin Bagley can be an all-star type of player. I just hope that he can, finally, with a new change of scenery, he can finally figure it out as far as his game and really, emerge as the player that we all wanted him to be when he was taken with the 2nd overall pick. The San Antonio Spurs traded Thad Young, Drew Eubanks, and a 2nd-round pick via Detroit to the Toronto Raptors for Goran Dragic and a protected 1st-round pick. San Antonio Spurs were just moving off Thad Young's contract as he didn't really fit with their timeline, and getting a 1st-round pick is nice. Goran Dragic is an expiring contract, and he's most likely to be bought out, so they just got a 1st-round pick for Thaddeus Young. As for the Raptors, it's not really doing much for them either, except that Thaddeus Young is a really good player, and if they decide to use him as a backup in the future, he's a really good power forward, fairly underrated. So I think that's a really good move for them if they plan to use him as either a trade piece or just as a player for them in the future. Moving off of Goran Dragic isn't too consequential. He was on an expiring deal. Giving up that 1st-round pick isn't ideal, but they are overachieving this season, so hopefully they'll continue to grow off of that. Solid move for both teams. So after the New Orleans Pelicans traded Nickeil Alexander-Walker to the Portland Trail Blazers, the Blazers were involved in a 3-team trade that sent Nickeil Alexander-Walker to Utah. Utah sent Joe Ingles and Elijah Hughes to Portland. The Blazers sent Thomas Satoransky to the Spurs, who sent Juancho Hernangomez to the Jazz, and the Blazers and Spurs also received second-round picks from the Jazz. Now, as far as the Blazers side of things, they turned Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who was a solid young player, who wasn't really needed because of Anthony Simons and them both being, lead guards. And they sent him out for Joe Ingles and Elijah Hughes. Joe Ingles is currently out for the season with injury, so that's not really going to be a huge deal for him. And Elijah Hughes is somebody I don't know much about, honestly. And the Blazers also traded Thomas Satoransky to the Spurs, and that wasn't really consequential for them. They're really betting on Anthony Simons and maybe a little bit of Nasir Little. So I'm not really, huge on that trade for them, but it didn't really make them any worse either. For the Spurs, they didn't really give up much. They didn't really get back much except for a second-round pick from the Jazz. As far as the Jazz, I don't think they should have traded Joe Ingles, but he was on the last year of his contract, and he just suffered a season-ending injury. So I understand why they did it, but I feel like he just really important to what they're currently doing or what they have been doing for the past few years. So it's sad to see him go, but I kind of understand why they did it from a business perspective. It's a pretty mad trade for everybody. But hopefully Nickeil Alexander-Walker can thrive somehow in Utah. The Sacramento Kings traded Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, Tristan Thompson to the Indiana Pacers for Domantas Sabonis, Jeremy Lamb, Justin Holiday, and a 2023 second-round pick. Now, as far as the Kings, I'm a little more optimistic on their perspective of this move than most people. Even though I'm not sure that it's, a great move, I'm pretty sure, it's not a great move. It's not a good move, at least in my opinion. But it's not the worst move I've ever seen other people are acting like. And here's why. The Kings haven't made the playoffs in, how long? I think it's been at least 15 years at this point. 15 plus years. So trading for Domantas Sabonis to try and make the playoffs, I'm assuming next year, because I don't think they're really in the race that much this year. But trading for Domantas Sabonis, who is an established all-star caliber player, to try and make the playoffs is something that I understand, even though it's not something that I am in love with. So for the direction that they're trying to go, this is a solid move. Although I do not think that they should have given up on Tyrese Halliburton. I think they should have stuck to the rebuild. But at the same time, if they're trying to make the playoffs, then making this move is not a bad way to go. Now, as far as the Pacers side, I love this deal. They were going to blow it up anyway, as they should. Domantas Sabonis was going to be moved, and getting someone like Tyrese Halliburton with the amount of potential that he has to be a really great player is really good for them. They also got back Buddy Hield, who's always going to be nice to have. Tristan Thompson, salary filler. And they only gave up, a second-round pick and Jeremy Lamb and Justin Holiday attached to Domantas Sabonis to get a young player with as much potential as Tyrese Halliburton. So this is a great move for them. The Kings is pretty iffy. I get what they were going for, but I'm still not sure if I would have done it if I was the Kings GM. It's not a great move, but it makes sense for what they were trying to go for. The Portland Trail Blazers traded CJ McCollum to the New Orleans Pelicans for Josh Hart, Tomas Satoransky, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Didi Louzada, a 2022 first-round pick, and 2 second-round picks. Now, for the Trailblazers, I'm glad they're finally trying to blow up the team and trying to rebuild. They should have done it years ago, in my opinion, but I'm glad they're finally trying to do it now, even though they have a lot less leverage than they would have had if they'd done it years ago. So this package kind of makes sense for TJ McCollum. I feel like they would have gotten more if they had traded him after that playoff run where he was going off, or even earlier than that, or even just a little bit later than that. But trading him right now loses a lot of their leverage in the position that they're in. But this is a solid package considering, where they're at in their franchise right now. Getting a first-round pick back and 2 second-round picks back is really nice. Getting someone like Nickeil Alexander-Walker would have been nice if they didn't move him, because they already have Anthony Simons, so that made sense. And then Josh Hart, Tomas Satoransky were just contracts to fill up, and to fill up the space. CJ McCollum is obviously making a lot more than they are. For the Pelicans, this is a really good move for them. They didn't give up anything of super importance. It's sad to see Nickeil Alexander-Walker go. When we're trading for an established guy like CJ McCollum, who is somebody who can get buckets and who can be an all-star caliber guy, then it's really nice for them. And this is on their push to make the playoffs. If Zion can come back and be the same player that he was when he was playing, which is an elite player, if Brandon Ingram, can stay on that course of improving every year, and then CJ McCollum can be their other guy, hopefully they can, make a run for the play-in or maybe even the playoffs in the future if Zion is healthy. But that's really what this all depends on. But if they have a healthy Zion, a healthy Ingram, and a healthy CJ McCollum, and they disappoint again, then it's going to be a problem and we can start asking questions. But for right now, it's a really good move. The Indiana Pacers traded Caris LeVert and a 2022 second-round pick via Miami to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Ricky Rubio, a lottery-protected 2022 first-round pick, and 2 2022 second-round picks via Houston and Utah, respectively. Now, for the Indiana Pacers, getting back a first-round pick as well as a solid point guard in Ricky Rubio, even though he's out for the season, prayers up to him, is a pretty good return for Caris LeVert, in my opinion. You know, there's not much to say there. Caris LeVert wasn't really doing much for them, and with them trying to start over, I guess they didn't see Caris LeVert as that guy to lead the franchise, so they traded him to the Cavs. Now, as far as the Cavs' perspective, I think this is a really solid move for them as well. They've been looking to get Caris LeVert. They've always been rumored to get Caris LeVert for a while, and for them actually to pull it off with a lottery-protected first-round pick, which just in case they fall out of their great spot, then they'll be able to have that pick in the lottery. And, you know, Ricky Rubio, who is someone going forward that probably wasn't going to be a part of their future, is, you know, really good for getting someone like Caris LeVert, who we all know can be a really good scorer and can be a solid playmaker and can definitely help them. The only questions is that whether they play him at the 2 or the 3, and, you know, what the deal is with Colin Sexton when he comes back and what they're going to do with him. But overall, this is a really solid move for the team. And last but not least, the trade that kicked this off, the Clippers traded for Norman Powell and Robert Covington, and they gave up Eric Bledsoe, Justice Winslow, Keon Johnson, and a 2025 second-round pick via Detroit. Now, for the Trailblazers, this trade really, you know, signaled that they were going to try and rebuild, because there was no other reason to trade Norman Powell and Robert Covington, 2 of their most important players, for people like Eric Bledsoe, Justice Winslow, and Keon Johnson, people that would not help them try and win games in the regular season. So it was pretty clear that they were blowing it up, and they really could have gotten a first-round pick from another team. But the Clippers didn't have any first-round picks, so if you're trading with the Clippers, this is pretty much what you were going to get. But they really could have traded Norman Powell and Robert Covington to a different team and gotten a first-round pick. So this was kind of a fumble for them. For the Clippers, they get a really good scorer and solid defender in Norman Powell. And then they get a 3-and-D guy in Robert Covington, so it's really going to help them out once Paul George and Kawhi Leonard come back. They're just stacking their chips so that they can go all in when their superstars come back. So this is a really good move for them without them having to give up too much. So those are my first impressions for all of the 2022 trade deadline moves. I'm going to be, you know, making videos over, you know, the next week or two, giving my more in-depth thoughts on these trades. But for right now, these are just my first impressions and what I think of them initially. Please leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Subscribe, hit the noti bell, and all of that. That'll help on my channel. Follow me on my socials in the description. And I am out. Peace.